that I think is not only brilliant and shifted the way I was thinking, but is so helpful. Because what he said was, every time you sit down to write, ask yourself this question: are you the writer or the author? And that really made me think. And I asked him, so what do you see as the difference? He said, the author is about the concepts. It's about the message. It's about what is it you want to communicate and why are you writing this book? A writer, when they sit down, they're editing. They're making sure everything's spelled correctly. They're worried about sentence structure. He said, so those are two different mindsets. And if you sit down every time as the writer, you're very unlikely to get your message across. And I just thought that was really insightful and helpful to me, because I do think of that every single time that I sit down to write. And I think, no, today I'm the author, and my job is to get that message communicated effectively. And another day I'll be the writer and I'll worry about the editing.
How are you, Patty? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we've been having a little bit of technical fun today, and that seems to be the norm. But we are here, and we're doing this, and we're hoping that everything works out great. And we'll do our best, right? With technology.
That's all you can do.
We can all do our best. I appreciate that. So let us know a little bit about you. Welcome to the podcast. I'm starting off here, my first recording of the day, and I really appreciate you spending time today to be a part of the podcast. Let's introduce you to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about you and maybe a little bit how we connected. That's interesting too.
Sure, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm Patty Block, and I focus on helping women business owners to strategically grow their revenue so that they have more choices, they feel more empowered, they can make better decisions about their business. And I really serve as an outsourced chief operating officer. So I'm helping them connect the dots in their financial and their operational processes, but also to really focus on how to run their business their way and not follow some cookie cutter approach. So that's the work that I do. If you ask me what was the most important thing about me, I would say I've been the single mom of 3 young adults since my youngest was 2 and he just turned 30. So I've raised my children and always had the goal of raising them as good humans, and I've done that. So I'm very proud of my kids, and I have to say proud of myself because it's been a somewhat difficult journey. But I'm very proud of my kids. They're all 3 business owners.
Nice. See, that's beautiful. I love hearing that story. I love hearing how your kids grow up, they move on, they do their thing, and just that sense of pride, right? To see them take that step and move out into the world, find their place, right? Because there's the early days when your kids are young. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And they have no idea, or maybe they do, but you just kind of have guide and shape them as best as you can and give them all the support they need. And then you just hope that they land on their feet and do well. So it's nice to hear your kids are doing well. That's great.
Yes, thank you. And in addition to finding their place in the world, it's how they contribute to their communities. Nice. And each of my kids is doing that in their own ways. Each one is different. And I love seeing that. And I love building my relationship with them as adults, because that's very different than when they're growing up. So all of that to me is just, it's amazing. And I feel so grateful.
Beautiful. See, that's a great, I love it. Really, really good. Okay. So we met through a mutual contact, a sweet guy who, I've had him on my podcast in the past. We talk on Clubhouse quite often. Chris Michelle, great gentleman. Tell me a little bit about Chris and how you and Chris connected.
Yes. So this is going to bring another podcaster into the conversation. So we have a mutual friend named Jürgen Strauss, who's based in Australia. And he had both Chris and I on as podcast guests. And, of course, separately and many years ago. And Kristen and I didn't know each other. But more recently, Jürgen has created a community. He's just finished his 500th episode of his podcast. So he created a community of all his podcast guests, which I think is so clever. And that's how Chris and I met, was through that community.
Nice. Okay. So you know what? That's actually something that I'm working on behind the scenes without even knowing that someone has done this. I anticipate that someone's thought of it before, but I'm actually in the process of building something like that. So I'm very curious. Tell me a little bit about how the group runs. I'm making notes. What did you like about this community of past guests?
Well, you figure people that are guests on podcasts have a message, and they have something that they're passionate about. They care a lot about serving others. I mean, that's just a common theme with people who want to be a guest on a podcast. So that was my initial thought, is, yes, I want to meet the 499 other people who have been a guest. And Jürgen set it up on a system called, or it's a platform called Heartbeat.
Okay.
And he named his community and then set it up and started inviting everyone who's been a guest. And then I think he's done a couple of virtual meetings so that people can get to know each other. And that's really what's been happening, is through Heartbeat, you can also set up meetings. And so we've been meeting each other individually. And so that in itself, we have Jürgen as that center point, which is kind of nice. And then I make the assumption that all of these are good, kind, wonderful people that are super smart and super passionate. And then we take that concept. So we already feel like we know each other before we even meet.
Yeah. And you can reference past podcast appearance. You can listen to the podcast. You can get to know a little bit about the person that you might be connecting with through this network. That's really smart. Really, really smart. So is this what you would define as a mastermind?
No, this is really a networking group.
Okay.
And
so tell me the difference between this and a mastermind.
Yes, typically masterminds are paid as opposed to free. And with a mastermind, it's usually a very small, closed community. So it might be 10 people in a mastermind. And actually 10 is a little bit big for a mastermind group. And the reason is because it's very structured in a traditional mastermind, where they have what are called hot seats, so that people take turns. There's usually a facilitator, and it's usually the person that has developed this mastermind group and then is selling those seats. So they are facilitating the meeting, and they're helping the members achieve whatever goal they've set out as a mastermind. And every mastermind has a different purpose.
Okay, so we chatted before we hit record that you had some thoughts about masterminds. It's not really the topic of our discussion for the podcast at this point, but I'm curious because I'm on that path. I'm trying to figure out networking, masterminds, everything. So you've already helped me already. But your thoughts on a mastermind and what you think a quality mastermind that gives back to its members, what your experience is, what you prefer.
My experience with traditional masterminds is they make me kind of uncomfortable. I understand the concept, but it's very much a system, in my opinion, that was developed by men for men. And most women that I know, that I work with, I've had my company since 2006. I've been doing this kind of work for longer than that. And as women, often the mastermind structure doesn't work very well for us. And so I'm really not very interested in that traditional model, but people have started to innovate around masterminds. And I think that can be very effective, where you're in a relatively small closed group. You're still paying to participate, but there's a very specific purpose. And it is not a traditional format where you're in a hot seat, where you're put on the spot, where you can only really bring your problems. We should be talking about our achievements in addition to our problems. And having a very targeted purpose and a very strong group of like-minded individuals who are all coming to it for that same purpose can be very effective. I just don't really like the traditional structure. And I think for women in particular, what I did is I created a group called the Revenue Roundtable. And it's also a paid group. So people pay to participate, and I keep it small. And that is around generating more revenue with less stress. So that is our purpose. And that is also what I teach. So I bring all of that knowledge and experience into Revenue Roundtable, and then we work as a group. We do have a format, but it's not a mastermind format. And in fact, I think of it sometimes as an anti-mastermind because it's much more about that particular purpose of how do you go about generating more revenue with less time, energy, stress, and how do you get really great results? And the format is much more not only supportive and challenging, but is also flexible. And people don't have to worry about being put on the spot because it's just not structured that way.
Okay, so it's a little less confrontational then?
I think that's a good way to say it.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a picture of a stool sitting up on a stage, and Patty has to go sit on the stool, and now we attack with questions and criticisms, maybe compliments, but we kind of come at you with what we think you should do, and you have to filter it all as the person on the hot seat, and maybe you'll get something out of it, maybe you won't. Like, it seems a little bit of an attack, I guess, in a way, right?
And sometimes it feels that way.
Okay. So from a female point of view, see, now I didn't even consider this, and I feel ashamed that I didn't, but that doesn't work in most situations, would you say?
Well, again, I don't think we can generalize to all women.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
However, the women that I work with are often, it feels like it puts us on the spot. So the women that I work with are experts in their fields. They're highly educated, high achieving. They're not in any way shy or would feel weird being in a group environment. They will thrive in a group environment. However, to your point, as women, we don't want to enter into a situation that feels like conflict, where we are worried before we even go into the meeting. We have that anxiety of what's going to happen. This is unpredictable. It could feel like a criticism. So that's uncomfortable for us. Then when we go into the environment, then we're kind of on pins and needles, waiting to see what's going to happen. So none of that is conducive to creative thinking or solving problems, not the way women think and solve problems. So that's why I'm just not a big fan of that traditional model of masterminds and why I created something different.
I love it. Okay, see, you've taught me so much already. I really appreciate that, Patty. You're really, when speaking with you so far, in like the several chats we've had, you're just so gentle and genuine that I'm so happy to have you on the podcast today. It's great. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that people that are listening to this and identify with what we're talking about are like, there is an alternative. I don't have one option. And, masterminds is the only way that I can get that kind of feedback, community, and support. There are other ways to do this, and you're leading the way with that. So thank you, Patty, for doing that. It's great.
Thank you.
So on the podcast today, we're talking about writing, and you are an author and you're in the process of writing. And I love talking to authors that are in the trenches, writing their books and working on them, because there's so much creativity right now during the process. Tell me a little bit about your author journey, maybe how this all started for you to begin writing.
Sure. And it's an interesting journey that I've been on, because I have to say I was resistant to writing a book because I don't want to do what everyone else does. And everyone you know is writing a book. So for years, I had people say to me, oh, you should write a book. Oh, this would be great. Oh, I'd love to read more about this. And I kept putting it off because I had other priorities and really thought, I just don't want to do what everyone else is doing. And over time, I started to realize very much what we just talked about, that I don't have to do everything the way others do it. And what I came around to is I'm what you would traditionally call a good girl. And there are lots of us out there. That means when we were young, we really were striving to please people. We're going to follow the rules. We're not just going to meet expectations. We're going to exceed expectations. We're going to be a high achiever. We're good girls who need to please those around us, keep everybody happy. That's kind of our watchword. And we grow up thinking that that is what we'll always be. That's the way we'll always be. And to some extent that is true because that is our nature. That's my nature, right? Except what we don't realize when we're young is that at some point we're going to realize that that is not serving us. And there are many ways that that has manifested for me. One of which was, I think I'm doing everything right. My family expects me to grow up, get my education, get married, have children, raise my family. I do all of those things. And all of a sudden, I'm 35 years old with a surprise divorce and 3 little kids at home. And it's like getting kicked in the teeth. And I'm thinking, but wait, I did everything right. What did I do wrong? I just don't get this. Why is this happening when I did everything right? Quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point that many of us as women reach where we realize this is not serving me. And while there are a lot of benefits to being known as a good girl, there are downsides too. And one of those is taking care of everybody else and not taking care of yourself. And that journey has been really interesting for me. So even though I have now brought innovation into what I do, the work that I do, and deciding to write a book, the underpinning of that is I'm still a good girl. I'm always going to be a good girl. That is my nature. And what happens is the ghost of the good girl kind of pops up her head every once in a while. So like I was in a group environment and we were working on a spreadsheet together that was being shared. And somebody said, well, you just have to fill in the blanks. And my immediate thought was, oh, this is great. I have to get the right answer. Right? Like it's a formula. Like there is a right answer. I don't think I need to find my right answer. And that's the power of frameworks. So that's a little bit about my journey in terms of understanding myself, understanding my buyers who are also good girls, and understanding when that stops serving us and we have that moment, what do we do with it? And how do we move forward? In my case, it's with innovation and thinking of creative new ways of doing things. And other people may have other ways that they move forward. So that is really why I teach women how to run your business your way. That's what that's about. It's about taking all the benefits of being a good girl and turning that to innovation and to understanding what you need, what you want, and what's going to serve you best in your business. So all that to say, I am writing a book. I have loved the journey. I had heard from others that it was very much about learning about yourself and trusting yourself. And I've seen that. And my thinking has evolved. I think the book is completely different than when I first started writing it. And so that's been really fascinating to me. And I had so everyone I know who's written a book, I want to pick their brain. So I always ask a lot of questions. And one of my colleagues gave me some advice that I wanted to share today that I think is not only brilliant and shifted the way I was thinking, but is so helpful. Because what he said was, every time you sit down to write, ask yourself this question: are you the writer or the author? And that really made me think. And I asked him, so what do you see as the difference? He said the author is about the concepts. It's about the message. It's about what is it you want to communicate and why are you writing this book? A writer, when they sit down, they're editing. They're making sure everything's spelled correctly. They're worried about sentence structure. He said, so those are two different mindsets. And if you sit down every time as the writer, you're very unlikely to get your message across. And I just thought that was really insightful and helpful to me because I do think of that every single time that I sit down to write. And I think, no, today I'm the author and my job is to get that message communicated effectively. And another day I'll be the writer and I'll worry about the editing.
That's really unique. I like that. That's, I don't think any of the authors that I've had on, Patty, have ever mentioned this as a framework. This is really, it does help shape and put you in the right space for the task at hand, right? And not get bogged down with all that. I had one author that came on and she captured her memoir as it is, as it came, and she didn't worry about sentence structure and everything because she wanted to capture the memoir, the way the memories came to her. And so she was in that author space and just let it fly. And she came out with something that was spectacular because she wasn't self-editing while she was trying to capture her thoughts.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's,
and I will mention, as a good girl, maybe an ex-good girl, that is a real challenge because we're perfectionists. And self-editing is kind of our standard operating procedure. We always self-edit everything in our head, everything we're going to talk about, everything we're writing. So for good girls like me, that is a huge challenge.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious now, as I hear you talk, I hear you explaining who you are as a good girl. And I love how you frame this. Can you tell me who you're not?
Who
are you
Who
not?
am I not? That's a great question. I am competitive in a friendly way. I am not one of these people who thinks that every business advisor out there is my competitor.
Okay, good.
I consider myself a high achieving collaborator, and no business advisor can take everyone who comes to them, nor should they. So there's such a great opportunity for us to refer to each other. So I think that's who I'm not, is somebody who views everyone as a competitor. I'm also not someone who is going to be disrespectful, because I think being respectful of others, recognizing the value in others, it's one of my top priorities, my beliefs. So I'm not someone who's going to be disrespectful. I'm also not someone who's going to be loud. I'm quiet. I'm calm. I'm paced, methodical. I'm not in any way, I'm not slow to take action or to make decisions, but I'm very measured. And so I'm not impulsive, but I'm also not going to kind of mess around and never get to the important decisions. Right? So that's who I'm not. I'm I'm someone who I lead with compassion. I'm never going to say anything to purposely hurt someone. That's just not who I am.
Mm. Yeah. See, that's interesting. I like that. So what do you see as potentially maybe a target on you as a good girl from someone else looking in that maybe they think they perceive as maybe a weakness or something they can exploit? You talked about being more quiet, more, not so out there and loud. Sometimes people assume that if you're not out there and loud, that you're not engaged, that you're not part of the conversation or part of what's going on, and you're just kind of on the exterior. I hear that myself. I'll be in meetings where we'll go around the table and there's a problem to be solved or suggestions to be made. And, they get to me and I'm just quietly sitting in the meeting, and the entire time the meeting is going on, I have an idea, but I'm just going to wait my turn. I'm not going to speak over somebody. I'm not going to try to capture the meeting or, become the star of the show. But in my mind, I'm like, this is the answer. Just wait your turn. And I hear people go through multiple suggestions, gets to me, and I make a suggestion, and the leader of the meeting drops the pen on the table, well, there you go. That was what we were waiting for. That's the answer right there. And I'm not trying to be, showy or anything, but that's kind of how I approach it. So, but people look at me sometimes like I'm not engaged because I'm more quiet, but I'm thinking, I'm contemplative, I'm wrestling this solution in my mind. I'm fully engaged. I'm just not loud and controlling of the room. So is there things that people see in you and they might want to try to exploit it or see it maybe as a weakness, but it's actually a strength for you?
Yes. It depends on how well they know me. So people who know me, I don't believe they ever think I'm not engaged. Okay. They may think I'm too intense. So, and I've heard that before, because much like you, it's not so much that I'm waiting my turn. It's I'm processing. I'm thinking about what makes sense to me, and I'm often measuring risk. So part of effective communication, in my view, and I teach this to my clients, part of effective communication is paying attention to how what you're saying is going to be received by the person you're speaking with or your audience. And a lot of people ignore that. So I'm reading the room, which I bet you're doing as well.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Right? So in a former life, I used to be a political consultant and a lobbyist. And that is where I really learned those skills of how you read a room, read your audience, pay attention to the body language, what they're saying verbally and non-verbally. And in my mind, I'm measuring risk. So for example, if I'm sitting in a group of very traditional kind of fundamental thinkers who believe in the corporate model, who believe in a lot of these old traditions, then I'm measuring risk of talking about an innovative strategy because they may not be receptive to that. So that's what's going on in my mind. I'm processing, I'm evaluating risk, I'm reading the room and deciding how is my audience going to receive what I'm going to say, not out of fear. I'm not afraid of how they're going to receive it. But I also feel as though, again, going back to the good girl, part of my job is to communicate effectively. And that means how it's received, not the words coming out of my mouth.
Wow. Yeah. The entire reading of the room. There's times where you're like, I have a suggestion or I have a comment, and this can go either way. And if I do it this way, it's going to end up this way. If I go this way, then Ralph over in the corner is not going to like that. And you're just you're going through all of this before your turn comes up to speak. And you're just like, okay, how can I be the most effective, get my message across, break down some barriers, do everything at the same time, and everyone hear my message And even though they're going to filter my message on however they see me, I still want my message to get through. So I'm going to present it this way. In another room, I'm going to present it this way, a different way.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly right.
I
will say that people who aren't operating in that way have a lot of trouble with getting their message across, with attracting the right kind of buyers, with interacting with their staff or their colleagues, because they're missing half the equation, more than half. Really, less than half is what actually comes out of your mouth. And one of the things that, going back to your original question about things that I think are a strength that others may criticize me for, one of those I mentioned is my intensity. I am intense and I'm very focused. And sometimes people have a hard time with that, but it's tremendously valuable to my clients and also to myself and my business because I'm very disciplined. Those are some of the best qualities of a good girl. We're high achieving and we're disciplined, we're focused. That allows us to follow the rules. And so that's one issue, is being intense. The other is that I don't speak fast, right? I speak
I know you're
I'm measured and methodical.
measured,
That's right.
Yeah,
I also have
it.
a lot of precision to my language. And so I'm thinking before I'm speaking. And not everybody does that. And we know a lot of people who don't do that. So sometimes people will not necessarily criticize me, but will comment that I need to speak faster. And my feeling is I say what I mean and I mean what I say. I am who I am. And the people who appreciate that I think before I speak are the people I want to attract. So I don't need to do this differently.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I love that. And that's the thing about, like, I've been in, again, some meetings where you have somebody who's brash and vocal and just loud and controlling. And for me, sitting in a meeting with somebody in leadership that's like that, I have a hard time engaging because I feel them to be so short with people, or they love the sound of their voice and their answer is the answer. I'm asking the question because I have to. HR tells me I have to ask this question, but I already know what my answer is. Let's go around the room and collect all your thoughts, but I'm really not interested in hearing what you have to say. And in that situation, in the way I view that, I just feel so undervalued, and that, we're here to work together as a team and as a collective, as a group, to come towards an answer. And, your leadership style in this situation is not helping to create and foster community. And I see you, Patty, more of a community builder, where you're out there to, again, read the room, bring in community, bring in buy-in, and you're thinking of others, not just yourself in a meeting setting, for example. That's a superpower, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really do think that. So how is this book going to help readers? What is your intent? And maybe just a little bit more about the book.
Sure. The intent is to help women really step into your power. And what that means is, and I've used this phrase a couple times before, which is, how do you run your business your way? There's an old corporate model from the 1950s, built for men, by men. It never worked for women. It doesn't work for women today. And there are, when you're your own boss, when you're a business owner, you have so many choices. And often we forget that we actually have those choices and we can do things differently. But good girls follow the rules. So that's a conundrum for us, because that's what we grew up with, is that old model. And we think that's how we should be running our businesses. So that really has become my mission. That is what the book is about, is how to run your business your way, how to discover what your way is, and that you don't have to do that alone, that I can help you. You can read the book. I have programs. I have all kinds of different ways that I can help you determine what is your way, what works best for you, which means you're going to be generating more revenue with less stress very quickly, because my belief is that everything flows from your pricing. And because I work with women experts, there's nothing on which to base your pricing except the old model, which was hourly billing. And that really does you a disservice. You're not selling your time. You're selling your expertise, your experience, your network, your breadth of knowledge. That is really what you're selling. And building that value in the mind of your buyer is what I consider the hidden advantage. And that is the title of my book, is Your Hidden Advantage. And it's how you can understand your value, get comfortable talking about it. That's why communication is so critical, because as women, we don't want to talk about ourselves because we think it's bragging. And I'm based in Texas, and here we have a saying, it's not bragging if it's true. And that's really what I teach, is how do you talk about the value that you really bring? And then how do you communicate that to your buyers and help them understand? And how do you build that value in their mind so that you're attracting the right people, so you're working with the right people, the people that you know really understand the value and will benefit from what you provide. So that is the focus of the book. So in that, I talk about mindset, how to shift your thinking, especially around money, around talking about yourself. The second piece is about how and where to find your ideal buyer. The third is about pricing and how to price for value. And the fourth is about communication and communicating effectively, understanding that just because you say it doesn't mean the other person gets it. And all the different techniques that you can use to communicate effectively and share your message.
Excellent. Patty, so how do people connect with you? You've been so gracious with your time today. I really appreciate it. How do people reach out? How do they connect to you and get into your world and speak to you after the fact? What do we do?
Thank you for having me. This has been great. And I would love to connect with your audience. You can reach me through my website, theblockgroup.net, theblockgroup.net. And I also have a free quiz called My Revenue Roadblocks. And with that quiz, it helps you identify the things that are in your way when it comes to pricing and how you're bringing in revenue to your business. And you can access that on the homepage of my website, My Revenue Roadblocks, and you will get a report and some information about first steps that you can take to deal with those things that are in your way. So I would love to connect with you, and I would encourage you to reach out to me.
Okay, so Patty, before we go, I would love for you to end off this with a message from one good girl to a good girl listener who completely identifies with what you've said. They're like, this Patty is me and I am Patty. I'm going to reach out. But you have a message from one good girl to the good girl listener that's listening. What would you say to that good girl listener today?
I would say you have more power than you recognize. And as you embrace that power, and it can be a quiet power, it can be, my view is it's often a hidden power. It's why I'm focused on the hidden advantage, because as women, we either overlook or we're embarrassed to acknowledge the power that we really have and how we can put that to work. So one good girl to another, I would say you have more power than you realize. And the idea of power is about having more choices. It's not power for the sake of having power or having power over another person. It's power so that you have choices to make decisions that work better for you.
So well said. Patty Block is here, everyone. Thank you so much, Patty, for being part of the podcast. Please go to the show notes. You'll see all the links. And when the book is available, Would you come back, Patty, and let's celebrate the book when the book is all done and
I would love to do that. Thank you.
Okay. I would love to have you back. Thank you so much, Patty, for your time today. The podcast is over. Thank you for being a part of this episode. If this is your very first episode, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. You can go back in our catalog. You can see some of the past episodes. But if you want to get a sneak peek of what's coming, you want to jump the line? Yeah, I got something for you. Go to our YouTube channel. Again, links are in the show notes and on our website, livingthenextchapter.com, and you can go to our YouTube channel and get the most recent episode way before everybody else. So we're putting this at the end of the podcast because we don't want to tell everyone. We don't want to have a stampede, But we're having some great conversations over on our YouTube channel. You're invited. You're this far. You're the one listening. You are invited to our YouTube channel. Go over there and you can see the most up-to-date episodes in real time. Meet you over there. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.